Infrastructure has always been a major driver of economic growth in the Syracuse region, from footpaths to the Erie Canal, then railroads and modern interstates. Efficient transportation has driven the economy. Early road systems in Syracuse centered between Genesee Street and the Erie Canal, which opened in 1823. This concentrated commerce and population in what is now the downtown area. By 1850, the canal was a major contributor to the economy, connecting Syracuse to Buffalo on the west and Albany on the east, and through both to the rest of the world economy. By 1922, railroads were assisting in the shipment of goods. The local urban road system continued to sprawl out along the canal, the Onondaga Creek, and then the railroad line. The automobile and the railroads proved so efficient that the Erie Canal was filled in and converted to Erie Boulevard. By the 1960s, Syracuse had two elevated highways cutting through the middle of the city: Interstate 690 from east to west and Interstate 81 from south to north. Regional urban development has continued to concentrate along those routes. In many ways, I-81 is like most urban highways. It was constructed through the path of least resistance. In the 1940s, the neighborhood was very dense and primarily Jewish in character. In the 1950s and 1960s, the city experienced a major influx of new African American residents, fleeing Jim Crow and segregation in the American South. By 1960, the neighborhood in the 15th Ward was mixed with Jewish and African American families. They became a target of urban renewal by city officials and redlined by lenders and insurance companies.
This period was marked by a complex social fabric. White and black students learning side by side in the ward schools, newly arrived Southerners patronizing Shore's Jewish deli, but all the while, aggressive policies against lending money to residents in this area made its upkeep difficult, and the area gradually declined into what local papers called a slum. By 1965, city officials inspired by new urban renewal programs in other cities across the nation made slum clearance a priority for this area. An aggressive program of demolition and construction was scheduled. By 1960, plans were in place to demolish over 1,800 structures in several neighborhoods under the auspices of several intersecting urban renewal projects. Beside the Interstate Highway Project, the largest was called the Community Plaza, a plan for a multi-acre pedestrianized area in the heart of the 15th Ward, which would host outdoor cafes, museums, and other large civic buildings and institutional offices. Since the destruction of the 15th Ward and the construction of Interstate 81, the city has seen population loss and a decrease in median income relative to city and national averages. Before I-81 population in the neighborhood was between 2 and 4% of total Syracuse population, after it dropped to 1% in 1960 and 0.8% in 1980. There was a surge to the data in 2010 not due to growth, but because the census tract was merged with downtown. Since the 1960s, median household income in the neighborhood around the viaduct has continued to decrease relative to the median household income citywide, 58% in the 60s and down to just 40% in 2010. But the most visually dramatic change to the neighborhood is the loss of building fabric, and the loss of the effectiveness of the city grid through the creation of one-way streets and superblocks when the elevated viaduct was constructed. The urban highway system was built at a time when Syracuse was still primarily an industrial and manufacturing center for upstate New York. It was the most logical form of transporting goods by heaving trucking from one point to another and avoiding the delays of idling in a city. However, since that time, the city has shifted to primarily service-related industries with less demand for single-route heavy trucking through the city and more commuter traffic into the city. There are many factors, social, economic, and political, that led to deindustrialization and population loss in Syracuse and many other legacy cities. 81 is not the sole culprit, but it allowed for a condition in Syracuse where city population has decreased while suburban population steadily increased to maintain a stable county-wide population. However, the people that moved out of the city were primarily those of higher economic means that took their wealth and tax base with them. A cursory analysis of the locations of primary employers and workers commuting to Syracuse reveals that not only has much of the population redistributed to the north of the city, but many large employers have located there as well, with the exception of the universities and hospitals. In considering the future of our region, it is helpful to look at the current conditions and weigh alternatives not just in terms of travel times, but also economic opportunity, connectivity, and pedestrian safety. For example, if it is possible to remove the highway, stimulate growth, reconnect our city, and only see a 2 to 5 minute change in typical travel times, then that's an option worth considering. Current conditions along and under the viaduct in downtown Syracuse hinder economic development, connections between vital centers, and livability. The current landscape presents a sea of parking lots and a massive 175-foot roadway one must cross of asphalt, half of which includes the dark, dripping underside of the elevated highway. This physical and psychological barrier in the middle of the city is foreboding at best. So let's work together with the DOT to make the best decision for the future of our city and our region. A decision that does not repeat or make worse the mistakes of the past, and one that endeavors to reconnect Syracuse.